Encounters with Star People, Untold Stories of Extraterrestrials and UFOs of Native American Indians. The facts: Dr. R.D. Secular Clark, Professor Emeritus of Montana State University, who is Cherokee Choctaw, has been researching the Star People and collecting encounters between them and Native Indians for many years. So, are we alone? If not, what are the implications if the public becomes fully aware of this? And how will it change the way we look at reality, science, technology, and history? Now, what they tell us coincides with what the Emerald Tablets written by Thoth the Atlantean says. Now, despite the fact that this topic has been considered some kind of a conspiracy theory or tall tales for years, any intelligent person who actually decides to take a gander at the evidence cannot really deny the existence of unidentified flying objects, UFOs, as well as the idea that some of them may actually be piloted by extraterrestrial beings from somewhere else in the universe, or as Manly P. Hall tells us, they could actually be the Atlanteans, the ancestor of the people that used to live on Earth, and there are fewer of them now since Atlantis sunk. Now, as far as the UFOs go, there is physical evidence in the form of materials from downed crafts, radar trackings, pictures and videos, the USS Nimitz encounter in 2004, for example. And when it comes to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, there are witness testimonies from generals, other high-ranking government officials, whistleblowers, astronauts from all over the world, even former Defense Minister of Canada, Paul Hellyer, for decades has been going on talking about this in various seminars and lectures. The fact that these craft perform maneuvers no known man-made craft also contributes to extraterrestrial hypothesis and their advanced technology. Another factor to consider is the vast amount of stories that dates back thousands of years, told by several cultures all over the world, from ancient lore all the way to modern-day lore. Indigenous cultures from North America are a great example. And he says, "My people tell of star people who came to us many generations ago. The star people brought spiritual teachings and stories and maps of the cosmos, and they offered these freely. They were kind, loving, and set a great example, and when they left us, my people say, there was a loneliness like no other." And they described them as being pale beings, and they also had beards. And now we know that the Native Americans, the natives of Americas do not have beards. They cannot grow beards. It's only the Westerners that can grow beards. So that shows that they're not from the area, obviously. Now, for the past few months, he says, I've been sharing the work of Dr. R.D. Secular Clark, a Professor Emeritus of Montana State University, who is Cherokee Choctaw and has been researching the Star People, collecting encounters between them and Native Indians for many years. She first learned about the Star People when her grandmother told her the ancient legend of her people. I've written about a story she shared regarding an elder who told a story about a ship that crashed on his reservation. And it's another elder who shared a story of a petrified alien heart, which he claimed belonged to the Star People. And my last recount was about the stories told by Indigenous elders about Star People who are currently, and have been for a long time, living inside of the Earth. And we know that that is recently being told by an anthropologist, archaeologist in Peru, who's taking people to areas of Pumapunku and others, showing them the very strange constructions and telling them that these Atlanteans, what we call Atlanteans, these ancient people with advanced technology, are pale, they're very large-bodied, and they come out at twilight, either sun up or sun down, because they cannot stand the intensity of our sun. Now, we remember that we had Anunnaki and giants and Nephilim before the Great Flood, and the sun had changed after the Great Flood with Noah, and that we were, after then, able to see rainbows And that was the covenant that God made with Noah and the future generations, and concerning the rainbow. So these people, this anthropologist, archaeologist of Peru says, are still living underground in these underground cities. And he says, what do you think? They made these constructions just for show? It's not for show. That these things are very, very easily, very well constructed underneath. The underground cities is where the so-called Anunnaki Nephilim Atlanteans are still living today. And this is also, according to what the Emerald Tablets write, and you'll find the playlist in my videos, written by Thoth the Atlantean. Thoth the Atlantean told us that there were many Atlanteans that escaped the sinking of Atlantis, which supposedly happened not in one event, but a couple of events taking a couple of thousand years apart for each, and that they had gone with their technology, building pyramids and having space flight. They had gone to other areas of the earth, building cities with pyramids. And we have pyramids all over the world, from North America, South America. There's even one, they say, around somewhere in New York. And there's also, of course, in China and Greece, Egypt, Africa, and Europe as well. And that these deities of these areas, these new areas of pyramids and high technology, were actually Atlanteans. And he was Thoth was one of the deities of ancient Egypt, rumored to have been the one who built the Giza pyramid. And he tells us that he had a spaceship and that he's buried it under a sphinx in a plateau of pyramids. Is it Giza or could it be somewhere else? We have no idea. But he also spoke about luxurious underground cities. Just like this archaeologist from Peru who makes tour guide. He organizes tours. One of them is one of the people that goes there is Brian Forrester. I was watching a Brian Forrester video, and that's how I learned of what he was saying. That these quote-unquote Nephilim, alien Anunnaki Atlanteans are still living, and they live for thousands of years, and they're living underneath these areas. So going back to this sounds like exactly what's happening and what we're hearing from the Native American legends concerning these star people. And they felt the loneliness, they said, when they were once like no other after they left, because they gave them their technology, they gave them a code of ethics and laws, and were an example to them of how to be loving with each other. Now, for the past few months, he said, Dr. R.D. Six-Killer Clark of Montana State University wrote concerning this. And Dr. Clark compiled in her book, Encounters with Star People, Untold Stories of American Indians. Chapter 3 is titled, Sometimes They Come for Families. And right off the bat, I found this interesting because, having been a researcher into the phenomena myself for a very long time, I know that the idea that some of these beings are taking people and families, in some cases large communities, is not uncommon. It might sound scary, but the truth is that within the lore, many of these beings don't have much interest in hurting or harming us. And that being said, there are stories of both malevolent and benevolent types of beings, but for the most part, it does not seem that the various groups visiting us mean us any harm. There are things happening that we don't understand, or perhaps we're not capable of understanding, and yet some of these events we might perceive in a fearful, harmful way, of course, because nobody likes being, sort of taken away by force. That's not, of course, beneficial in any way. Now, when it comes to supposed abduction stories and the claims made by tens of thousands of people, there are many consistencies in their stories, and it's truly a very interesting issue to look into, but that's a different topic. Now, Dr. Clark shares in her book as follows. In 1930, a fur trapper named Arnaud Laurent and his son saw a strange light in an unusual aircraft crossing the north sky towards Lake Anjikuni in northern Canada. The trappers decided the object was a cylindrical or bullet shape, and shortly thereafter Joe LaBelle, another trapper, snowshoed to the Eskimo fishing village of Anjikuni, The village, home to 2,000 Eskimos, appeared unnaturally silent when he arrived. He visited every hut and storehouse and found blackened stew pots, but no people there. Inexplicably, he did not find a single human track in the settlement either. LaBelle, concerned about the missing people, went directly to the telegraph office and reported the mystery to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Several hours later, the Mounties arrived and were baffled by the mass disappearance of the villagers. A search party looked for the missing villagers, but they were never found. The sled dogs belonging to the Eskimos were found buried under a 12-foot snowdrift at the perimeter of the camp. All of them had starved to death. The search party also discovered untouched provisions and food in the huts. Late that night, the Mounties stared in wonder as a strange blue glow lit a steady pulsing light, unlike the northern lights that frequented that part of Canada. Newspapers throughout the world reported the baffling disappearance of the 2,000 Eskimos. Many people believed there would be a rational explanation for the disappearance, but the Anjikuni group disappearance remains unsolved. Today, stories are still told in the Eskimo communities about the UFO that abducted an entire village. While this event in Canada is rare and unusual, there are encounters spoken about on reservations where entire families have disappeared without a trace, just as in the case of the Canadian disappearance. These events occurred simultaneously with the emergence of a mysterious craft. During the course of my research, I was told about two such events. On one occasion, a family of 14 disappeared, leaving behind plates that had been filled on the dinner table, a television blaring in the bedroom, and an oven that had not been turned off. Despite years of searching, no family members were ever located, but their relatives could show you a burned-out circle on the ground where they believe a spacecraft landed and spirited them away. Interesting, isn't it? There are even entire civilizations that have vanished without a trace, like the Mayans, for example. What happened to them still remains a mystery, and some believe they were also taken, quote-unquote. So, writing this line in this moment reminded me of Apollo 12 astronaut Al Worden, who shared his beliefs about the subject of a few years ago. Quote, "We are the aliens, but we just think there's somebody else, but we're the ones who came from somewhere else because somebody else had to survive, and they got in a little spacecraft, and they came here, and they landed, and they started civilization here, and that's what I believe. And if you don't believe me, go get books on the ancient Sumerians and see what they had to say about it, and they'll tell you right up front," end quote. Now, it's also interesting to note the fact that multiple astronauts have said, without a doubt, that we have been visited and are still being visited, and that they've been privileged enough to be in on that type of information. One great example would be Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was quite unspoken on the subject throughout his lifetime. Dr. Clark then goes on to describe an encounter she had with someone who had eventually become her friend, an elder who lived on a reserve in North Dakota, who had an alleged encounter with the Star People. He explained how Star People visiting the reservation was not uncommon when he was a child, but when the government came in and changed the land, the Star People stopped visiting. This man's name was Luther, according to him. Quote, "Sometimes when people disappeared on the reservation, it was said that the Star People had taken them away to live in the stars. Once the whole family disappeared. I was a young man when the family disappeared, and the disappearance happened right after I got home from the war, probably around 1946 or 47 maybe. They were never found, and their relatives went to visit. They found everything just like they got up in the middle of dinner and walked away. Food on the table, and everything seemed to be in order except the family. There were 7 of them in all. They were all gone, and no one on the reservation ever saw them again. They held a ceremony, and the holy man said that they were taken to live among the Star People." He went on to describe his experience. "It was shortly after the dam was built, maybe 5 or 6 years or so after the family disappeared. I was down by the lake one evening. The horses went there to drink in the evenings, and I wanted to harness Peanuts and put him in the barn. It was just about dusk. Suddenly, the hair on my head stood up like an electric shock. I looked around, and that's what I saw it. A huge object came in over the butte to the north of the property. It came slowly, and it was the size of a battleship. I sat down on the edge of the lake and watched. The horses ran away, and I was alone. The craft moved in the center of the lake and just stayed there without moving. It was suspended in midair. At some point, I started back towards the cabin. That's when they saw me, I guess. Suddenly, a light came out like a searchlight and fell directly on me. I kept walking. I didn't know what else to do. When I got back to the house, I went inside. I went into the bedroom to look out the window, and that's when I saw them, 2 of them. They were in my bedroom. I stopped, frozen in my tracks when I saw them, and they looked at me and seemed just as surprised as me. They were about 5'7" or 8". They were dressed in light-colored uniforms that glistened when the light fell from the craft hit them. I started back towards the door, and they told me they would not hurt me. They were searching for something. I understood it to be something they had left behind or left here, but they could not find it. And when I asked them what they were looking for, they replied, but I did not understand what they said. He went on to describe how, when they went back in their craft and left, the craft stopped and hovered over the spot where the missing family once lived. Their cabin was submerged in water after the lake was built by the government. I watched for maybe 30 to 40 minutes. The spaceship just hung there, no movement, no sound, and then suddenly moved upwards and was gone, and I have not seen it since. One thing Luther vividly remembers is the fact that they had this stick-like thing. It had some kind of motor, I think, because I remember lights blinking on it. Strangest machine I ever saw. I had never seen anything like it. When I saw it a lot, I saw a lot in the war. They held it and pointed it around the room. The stick must have talked to them or something, because once they pointed it in every direction, they seemed satisfied that I did not have what they were looking for. They put it in a holster, and they told me not to be afraid, and I wasn't. They actually acted like I wasn't even in the room, just ignored me, so to speak. They were all business. They were shaped like humans. I remember they wore gloves because I watched that stick machine while they were in the room. I still wonder how it knew there was nothing in the room they were looking for. The conclusion? There are countless stories regarding supposed extraterrestrial contact, perhaps even millions. They're all scattered throughout history, and many are similar to the ones shared here. And to be honest, the consistencies and corroboration that come from examining multiple stories are truly jaw-dropping. There are so many similarities between the stories told by these experiencers, and the testimonies from actual whistleblowers, making one thing quite clear: something is and has been visiting us for quite some time. I believe it's nothing to be fearful of, but something to be cautious of. Perhaps the more cautious we become, the closer we get to finding out on a collective level. The idea that some people are being taken goes deep, far beyond the lore of stories such as this, but perhaps that's the topic of another article. It's safe to say, in my opinion, that we know it's happening. As far as why and for what reasons, that remains a mystery. And I personally, for the most part, in most cases, do not believe it's a malevolent type of thing, but I don't know, and there seems to be evidence for both benevolence and malevolence. Well, for one thing, I know one thing. If you're taken without your consent to it, that's not at all benevolent. Please leave your comments. Thank you so much. This is on Newsfeed by Collective Evolution on Collective Spark, Arjun Walia. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.